The pastor's wife was not human. The stories of flow divine. No one really knew when the building had started to grow. One day, the land was still empty. The next day, a corrugated iron fence already surrounded a vast construction site. What shocked the residents of the neighborhood was the speed. In less than 3 months, a gigantic white building with tinted windows rose, surmounted by a luminous name, Temple of Eternal Glory. "Did you see that? It grew like a mushroom," a old carpenter muttered, leaning on his workbench. "It even looks like the ground hasn't been dug," a young tailor added, squinting. It wasn't a building like the others. It was a church, but not just any one. The first few weeks, people came out of curiosity, then without understanding how they stayed. The sermons of Reverend Pastor Caleb, a young man with a deep voice, seemed to pass through the soul. Testimonies poured in. The sick said they had been healed. The infertile became mothers. And the donations were endless. Envelopes, vehicles, transfers, even land. Rumors said that a celebrity had almost emptied his account to honor the anointing of Reverend Pastor Caleb. But what was most striking was the lack of history. No trace of the church's origin, no old address, no old videos of the pastor. He had appeared like the building that came out of nowhere. One Sunday morning, as the church was overflowing, the pastor took the microphone after a long moment of silence. "Beloved, God has blessed me." A murmur ran through the audience. "For years, I have walked alone, focused on the ministry. But today, I present to you the one that God has given me, my crown." And there, she stood up, radiant, worthy of an apparition. Her name was Divine. A woman with perfect skin. Her gait was fluid, calculated. She had never been on the stage before. No one had ever seen her in the church, not even among the discreet faithful in the back. But from that day on, she sat at the right hand of the pastor, and 2 months later, they got married. A wedding worthy of celestial royalty, orchestra, drones, limousine, everything seemed divine. An elder of the church had once whispered during a meeting, "When something grows too fast, its roots are not blessed." The next day, he disappeared. His family said he had gone on a spiritual retreat in a mountain, but none could say where. With all the searches carried out, he was never found. A few weeks after the wedding, things began to change, not abruptly, but slowly, like a disease that settles in quietly. Divine, now called Mama Pastor, arrived every Sunday with outfits that made people murmur, glittering dresses cut from fabrics that hugged every curve of her body like a second skin. The women looked away. The men, however, pretended to pray but watched. Some faithful said, "That's not an outfit for a pastor's wife." "She's diverting hearts while she talks about sanctification," said another. But as soon as someone talked about it, the fervent faithful retorted, "You are jealous of the anointing. You want to destroy the ministry." Then one Sunday, Pastor Caleb was absent. Divine went up on the stage in his place. Her voice was soft, her tone maternal, but her words twisted the scriptures. And the following Sunday, she did it again. This time, Caleb was there sitting. He said nothing. He smiled. Divine preached in a satin dress, clinging to her skin, her heels clacking on the stage. And she repeated again, "God does not see what you see. The clothing is nothing. The heart is what he seeks. And I stand before him without shame, for I am one of his voices in this house." Behind her smile, a subtle arrogance seeped into her sermons. She claimed to receive revelations that even angels do not understand. And above all, anyone who criticized her was accused of rebellion against the anointed of the Lord. It was in this atmosphere that Priska entered the church. A young woman with a pure heart who had just moved into the neighborhood. She just wanted to serve God as she did in her old church. She quickly joined the musical group, and everyone was amazed by her voice at each performance, except for one. A woman with a fixed gaze, sitting to the right of the pastor. She smiled. But behind that smile, something was watching her. Something that had already sensed that a pure eye had just entered the house. One Sunday, the service had barely started for 30 minutes. Priska was singing. Her voice rose above the others, clear, vibrant. She was focused on the words, her eyes closed, her heart open. But suddenly, to the sound of the piano, a strange atmosphere descended into the room. The pastor's wife slowly went up on the stage. She took the microphone and everything changed. "Hallelujah," she said in a soft voice. A wave passed through the church. Several people began to cry. Men stood up screaming, "Speak, woman of God." Priska opened her eyes, and there, everything broke. Pastor Divine's face became distorted, revealing a hideous creature, with a neck covered in chains made of human hearts. Her hands moved like snakes. Priska jumped. "Lord," she whispered. She looked around her. No one seemed to see what she was seeing. Everyone was cheering. But she saw the beast. A voice whispered in Priska's head, "Get out of here now." She hurried down from the stage, abandoning the microphone under the confused stares of some choristers. "Priska," called the head of the musical group. "Priska, where are you going?" But she did not answer. In the hallway, she choked. The air was heavy. She staggered outside. When she passed the front door, the fog cleared. Tears ran down her face. "She is not a woman of God. She is not a woman," she repeated. That day, Priska decided that she would never set foot in that church again. For 2 weeks, she ignored all the messages, all the calls, all the shalom greetings that came from the members of the temple. But a few days later, in the late afternoon, the choir president, Brother Leandre, knocked on her door. He was accompanied by 2 other faithful members, Grass and Marvin, all smiling but worried. Priska politely received them. "Shalom," Leandre said, with a strained smile. Priska remained silent. "Are you avoiding us?" "No," Grace asked softly, her eyes downcast. "Priska, we came because we love you," Leandre declared, taking the floor. "You are part of the choir, of the house, of the vision, and we don't understand why you disappeared like that." Without explanation, in the middle of a service, Priska listened to them, calm. Grace continued. "You were our best voice. God can't have raised you up for you to abandon the assembly now." Priska took a long breath and then said in a trembling voice, "Because what I saw, I cannot ignore it." "What you saw," Marvin repeated. "Do you mean a spiritual attack?" Priska shook her head. "No, I mean what she really is." Leandre frowned. "Are you talking about Mama Pastor?" Priska looked up at them. Her gaze was serious and marked. "She is not a normal woman. She is not a servant of God, she is something else. Something that hides under that beauty, her clothes, that voice. She preaches, but she doesn't speak of life. She chants, she seduces, she puts to sleep." "Priska, stop." Leandre cut her off, visibly tense. "You're going too far. You're letting the devil confuse your mind. The pastor's wife has always been criticized by the jealous, but she is a woman of fire, a spiritual warrior. Demons don't like her." "It's normal," Marvin added. Priska lowered her head, her hands trembling. "You don't understand. What I saw was not an imagination. It was not a spiritual attack against me. It was not me who fled the church, it was the presence of God that left it." A heavy silence fell, but Leandre insisted almost harshly. "Be careful not to blaspheme against the Spirit of God, Priska. Don't you realize what you're saying?" Priska, her eyes misty but resolute. "I love you, but I can't go back there. An altar is erected in that house, and it's not the altar of God. You don't see it. I saw it, and I can no longer sing before a foreign throne." They left, some saddened, others convinced that she had been seduced. What the faithful ignored, what even the closest collaborators of Reverend Pastor Caleb never knew, was that everything had started in a forest long before the spotlights. Caleb was then just a young man without a name, without a ministry, who wandered from church to church waiting for a call from God. All he wanted was to be a pastor. It was his deepest desire. He was tired of praying into a void and hearing God remain silent. He had spent years sleeping in prayer rooms, fasting to the point of near madness. But nothing was moving, no call, no breakthrough. Until that strange encounter, a man had approached him at the exit of a prayer vigil in one of the churches he frequented. The words of this man had struck Caleb's soul. "Do you want the voice that crowds listen to without blinking? Do you want even demons to prostrate themselves when you pray? I can help you." Caleb had not answered that night. But 3 days later, he went to the appointed meeting place, an isolated forest. It was night. Caleb walked alone. Each step he took was one step too many, but he could no longer turn back. Caleb stopped dead. A circle of stones glowed faintly in front of him, lit by a torch planted in the ground. And there he was. The man in the red coat, but he wasn't alone. Around him, arranged in a semicircle, 5 silhouettes stood motionless. Caleb blinked. Impossible. He recognized some of these men. A high magistrate often seen on television. To his left, another familiar face, a well-known member of parliament who often prayed in the country's evangelical churches. And there, a very popular host, the very one who gave testimonies in Christian campaigns. Caleb felt his throat tighten. What is this? What is this? The man in the red coat spoke in a hoarse voice. You came, son of dust. This is a good sign. The man in the red coat approached, then declared in a solemn tone. Did you think you were the only one who wanted glory? All those you admire have already passed through here, and some, like you, first cried before they reigned. Caleb trembled. I just want my ministry to succeed. I have suffered too much. Fasting, prayer, solitude, and yet nothing. I want power. The world must listen to me. The man let out a slow laugh. You want the voice that makes crowds fall? You want the authority that makes the powerful cry? Then listen to me. He opened a small black box. Inside was a ring, not an ordinary ring, no, a black ring marked with a small triangle on top, a piece of red parchment and a tiny human skull. Caleb flinched. What is that? He whispered, his voice trembling. Your commitment, your pact. You will wear the ring on your right ring finger. From there, your wife will wait for you. She will join you when the temple is ready. But remember, she will never be a woman like the others. She will preach by your side. But she does not come from the world of the living. Caleb knelt in the circle, then held out his hand. The man slipped the ring onto his finger. He immediately felt a burning sensation. An invisible mark, a chain. It is done, the man declared. Your wife will come to you when everything is ready. You will recognize her. She will not need to speak. You will recognize her. The man in the red coat continued. Power must rest on something. A sacred building is not just held up by concrete. 7 days after buying your land, you will have to bury a living baby under the foundation of the main altar. Caleb's breath stopped short. He staggered. A what? But I can't. How am I supposed to find a living baby? The whole circle became colder. The 5 men, silent until then, slowly raised their eyes to him. None spoke. The man in the red coat spoke again. You don't need to search. We will give you the contact of a woman, a midwife. She works for us. She knows when and how to provide what is needed. It's not the first time. It won't be the last. Caleb was trembling all over. What if I refuse? The wind blew violently. The torches flickered. If you refuse, you will return to oblivion, and this forest will be your coffin. Caleb closed his eyes. Then the man raised 2 fingers to the night sky. The fire of the torch turned blood red. Now that you have accepted, you must know what you can never have again. Caleb slowly raised his head. The man in the red coat spoke with a smile on his lips. You will never know fatherhood. Your seed is cancelled. No child will bear your name. No heir will sit on your throne. Caleb opened his mouth in shock. No, I just wanted the ministry. I wanted to bless my house. I wanted a son someday. The man in the red coat replied coldly, Children are for free men. You now belong to the throne. Your only companion will be the one we send you. You will not choose her. You will not court her. She will come when the temple is ready. And when she comes, you will not have the right to say no to her. A few weeks after the night in the forest, everything changed around Caleb. The phone rang, doors opened, donations poured in. Faces he had seen in the clearing, the member of parliament, the host, the magistrate, invited him to lunch, mentioned him in their circle, and even made impressive donations. A businessman who until then had never looked at him twice sent him 10 million CFA francs with a simple message. May the Lord bless your nascent ministry. Caleb bought the land. 3 days after the signing of the purchase contract, Caleb received a call from the midwife. On the big day, he went silently to an isolated building on the outskirts. A woman in a white blouse was waiting for him. Not a word, not a smile, just a cold look. She handed him a sealed wooden box. Caleb didn't ask anything. He took the box, returned alone to the freshly cleaned land in the heart of the night. He dug, his hands trembling, his forehead on fire, tears in his eyes. He dug until he reached an exact level, and there he buried the live newborn. He covered the grave, and the next morning, the church foundations were poured. A few months later, the temple of eternal glory stood proudly. The faithful flocked, miracles rained down, and Caleb shone. Then one day, as he was sitting in his office, she appeared without a sound, without a door opening. She was standing there. Caleb recognized her without ever having seen her. She was the promise, the price. She walked towards him without saying a word, then stopped a few steps away from him and she spoke. I have come. The throne is ready. The people are ripe, it is time. Caleb felt his heart beating like a drum. Who are you? He asked in a muffled voice. She smiled. You called me in the forest. You received me by the ring. You built me a house and now I come to live in it. Then she placed a hand on his chest. My name is Divine and I have been your wife forever. This is how the following Sunday, Divine was presented to the assembly. Years passed and one day the church was buzzing. Golden banners, uniform choirs, cameras installed in every corner. The Temple of Eternal Glory was celebrating its 5th anniversary. And for the occasion, Pastor Caleb had planned big, 3 days of celebration, with pastors from several regions. Some were old acquaintances, others were strangers he said were sent by the Spirit. Divine was brilliant, sparkling in the second row. Her makeup glittered under the spotlights. That evening, it was Pastor Jonas who was to take the microphone. A discreet man, who had come from far away, little known to the public. His name did not make a lot of noise. Pastor Caleb and he had met during a pastor's conference abroad. Hence the invitation from the latter for this event. As soon as Pastor Jonas went up on the stage, the atmosphere changed. He didn't shout, he didn't gesticulate, he spoke softly. But each word seemed to carry an invisible fire. He preached on sanctification. He quoted Romans 12, then 2 Corinthians 7. And the more he spoke, the more the faces in the room became tense. At the end of his message, he closed his Bible and raised his right hand to the sky. Entering a moment of adoration, the room stood up, the music rose, and as the voices lifted to the sky, Jonas stopped abruptly. His eyes were wide open as if he had a vision. He was staring at a specific point in the room. Oh God, he murmured. Father, is this what I see? His eyes were still fixed on the second row. He saw Pastor Caleb's wife in her true form. She is covered with a cloak of blood and under her dress, it's not legs that I see. Jonas fell to his knees in tears. Lord, deliver this church. Open the eyes of your people. Do not allow them to worship death thinking they are serving you. Jonas raised his hand to the assembly, his voice trembling but firm. Church of the living God, pray. Open your mouths, reject the darkness, cry out to the Eternal One. Now for it is written in Luke 10 verse 19 that God has given us the power to walk on snakes and scorpions and over all the power of the enemy and nothing will harm us. He did not ask to pray for the message he had just delivered, no, but rather for the vision he had just had. The room vibrated with a strange tension. The voices rose, hands were raised, tears flowed. And suddenly, Divine felt something. A fire that passed through her from the inside. A fire she had never felt. It wasn't a pleasant heat, it was a pure, sharp, incendiary fire. She staggered. What is this? She whispered, lost. She raised her eyes to Caleb, sitting in the front row, and tried to make a sign with her hand, but her arm fell. She collapsed on the armchair. Around her, the church was still praying. The words became more powerful. Lord, may every disguised spirit be unmasked. May every power of darkness be dethroned. Divine gritted her teeth, fighting to get up. I must get out of here, she thought. She gathered her last strength. She got up with a jump, staggering, and tried to leave the room. She took a few steps. Jonas, in a loud voice, shouted again, do not stop. Continue. The light chases away the darkness. And at that precise moment, a shriek, a scream from the guts of the building, piercing, inhuman, everyone froze. Divine, her eyes wide open, her body trembling, and in a blinding flash, Divine disappeared there in front of everyone, in front of the cameras. All that was left was her dress, fallen to the ground, empty like an abandoned skin. The crowd, first frozen, began to stir. Where did she go? It was a demon, but she was the pastor's wife. We prayed with her, we fasted with her. Women were crying. Some of the faithful were already fleeing the church. Caleb, for his part, spun around like a madman. His gaze became glassy. He staggered, clutched a chair. His breath was short, his world was collapsing. Pastor Caleb, Pastor Jonas said, explain this to us. He held his hands to his head. Tears were streaming down his face. This is how they went to the pastoral office. Sitting in the black leather armchair, his face streaming with tears, Caleb was trembling. In front of him, 3 men, a guest pastor, a church elder, and Jonas. All of them were staring at him, none of them were speaking, they were waiting. You want the truth? Caleb whispered, his throat dry. I'll give it to you. Caleb slowly straightened up, took a deep breath, and then told them everything from the beginning until Divine's arrival. I know what I did will not be erased, but if you stay here, if you continue to drink the water from this well, you will curse yourselves. This soil is contaminated. Caleb was trembling. I beg you, leave, save your souls, burn this altar, uproot the foundations. I implore you before the blood shed here claims your children. He paused. A final tear rolled down his cheek. I sold my destiny for glory. He left the office before any of them could say anything. The engine roared. Caleb's car sped down the dusty road, its tires skidding on every turn. He was driving like a hunted man. But it wasn't the police who were chasing him, it was the pact. Caleb was trembling at the wheel. His hands were becoming sweaty, his ears were buzzing. He looked in the rearview mirror and wanted to scream. In the back seat, someone was sitting, a silent silhouette. He turned around abruptly. The back seat was empty, a honk, a missed turn. The vehicle swerved violently. Caleb tried to regain control, but the steering wheel was turning on its own as if it were obeying another hand. The vehicle crashed violently into a tree. The engine coughed one last time. Caleb was no longer moving. He was gone. 3 days after Caleb's death, the temple remained closed. No one dared to enter, not even to retrieve a forgotten Bible. The rumor had swollen. The powerful Reverend Pastor Caleb was a sorcerer in disguise. A confidential document written by the hand of a pastor who had witnessed Caleb's last moments had been handed over to local authorities. Without waiting, a radical decision was made. The church would be demolished. Thus, the demolition began one morning and the last pillar of the church was finally knocked down. Nothing was left of the temple of eternal glory, nothing except a marked ground. Not all that glitters is divine. When man uses the name of God to build defiled thrones, when he makes a pact with darkness under the cover of light, then he himself prepares his own grave and drags with him the innocent people he claimed to save. It is not enough to be acclaimed to be chosen, and it is not enough to build a church for it to be holy. The true call does not seek ovation. It seeks humility, truth, and life. Thank you for following this story. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like. See you next time for a new story.